Hello Year 10 and welcome to your next geography lesson. This is the final lesson that makes up this topic on urban issues and challenges. So we are looking at sustainable traffic management in today's lesson, and then we're going to be moving on to a next topic after half term. So we need to have a very quick recap. What does sustainable mean? Well, sustainable is when we do things now that will not compromise the standard of living and the quality of life for future generations. So it's about not being over-reliant on non-renewable energy, as one example. It's about doing things that won't lead to climate change or won't make climate change worse. So, what are we doing in this lesson? Well, we need to look at how urban transport strategies are being used to reduce traffic congestion all over the world. And we're going to look at three separate examples. We're going to look at Beijing, Freiburg, and also Singapore, in addition to what Newcastle are doing to try and improve the sustainability of our transport systems. So, Task 1, what is sustainable transport? Well, sustainable transport policies involve more than traffic reduction. So you can see in these two images of Mexico City and Beijing, so different parts of the world, that there is a lot of traffic and it's very congested, and as a result that may lead to crashes, which could lead to health problems. It could also mean there's lots of pollution going into the atmosphere, which will lead to climate change, and it's also going to produce a lot of noise pollution as well as actual pollution from the cars. So new technology is required to increase vehicle efficiency so that they run cleaner and invest in other modes of transport, for example, public transport. So reducing the amount of people that have their own cars and increasing the amount of people that are using trains, buses, metro links, bikes, for example. And then cycling and walking incentives will also be needed to encourage people to leave their cars behind. So it might be that their workplace gives them money towards a bike, or they pay for the bike, and they pay it back every month through their salary. Or it might be that there's an increase in the amount of cycle lanes or bus lanes so that you can get to work faster and safer without having to use a car. So for this task, you need to make sure that you've written down the definition and then you have identified why we need to be sustainable. So use the two images to help you. Now, other reasons why we need to be sustainable is because traffic is a major issue for countries all over the world. It doesn't matter whether you're in a less developed economy or whether you're in one of the most developed places in the world. Traffic congestion is still a problem, and we need to be sustainable regardless of our levels of development. However, it seems to be more of a problem in HICs, so high-income countries, because generally people have more money, so their car ownership is higher. It might be that they want to live in the countryside but commute into the city, so they need a car, or it might be that people just have a higher disposable income, so they see the car as a luxury as opposed to a need, a necessity. Okay, so Task 2 then, why do we need to be more sustainable? So you need to annotate your spider diagram looking at reasons why we need to be more sustainable. So what problems do vehicles running on fossil fuels pose? So a car that uses diesel or petrol, what problems do they create? Well, first and foremost, traffic congestion is wasteful on fuel. So if there's a lot of cars sat in traffic and they still have their engines running, then they're going to be releasing high amounts of pollution into the atmosphere. And we thought about this when we were learning about Rio de Janeiro and the environmental problems that they have. Because it was very congested in the city, there were lots of cars sat at standstill, and they had to try and relieve this pressure, so they had one-way lanes instead, which meant that the traffic was flowing much faster, and that will reduce the amount of fuel that's being wasted. Emissions can impact health. So if there's lots of car emissions, so lots of pollution being emitted from diesel and petrol cars, that can lead to respiratory problems such as asthma. Particulate matter can cause lung problems, so it can lead to lung cancer and reduce life expectancy. So that could reduce the levels of development within a country. If their life expectancy is low, that means that they will also have a low HDI score, so their Human Development Index score will be low as well. Nitrous oxides can form smoke and damage lung tissue, so that can lead to things like bronchitis. So that's another type of health condition that is a direct result of pollution. Traffic congestion slows down essential emergency services. So not only does it lead to high wasteful amounts of fuel, but it also means that it slows down emergency services, which means that there might be a higher death rate as they can't get to them as quickly as they would be able to if the traffic congestion wasn't as bad. In addition, it also has an economic impact. So if there's lots of congestion, it means that there's lots of traffic sat there not moving, which means that people will take longer to get to work. Delivery services, so companies that are delivering goods, whether that's food or electronics or clothes, they have to sit in the queues for longer, which means that they have to get paid more, which then leads to an economic problem. In addition, people can become more angry and their quality of life may be worse if they have to sit in traffic for a long period of time. Now, due to COVID and a lot of people working from home and not generally leaving the house, the amount of traffic on the roads has significantly reduced. However, when we go back to normal and people are commuting a lot more on the roads, there will be a spike in the amount of congestion, and therefore that will have a direct impact on how people are feeling for that day. In addition, we have things like vehicles can discolor buildings. So if they're producing lots of smoke and pollution into the atmosphere, it can turn them like a dirty black color, which isn't very appealing to the eye. And another thing is that emissions add acidity to rainwater. So they add to acid rain, and then that can lead to chemical weathering. So this is a link to when we learned about coasts. Chemical weathering is when it can erode away more of our limestone type rocks, and it dissolves them and it can break them down. So chemical weathering can happen because of the amount of pollution in the atmosphere, which is a big problem. Okay, so once you've annotated your spider diagram, we're going to look at Newcastle's attempts to reduce traffic. So this is a map of Newcastle, and you can see that there's lots of different things on there. And we need to annotate this map to look at how Newcastle has attempted to reduce traffic. So first and foremost, we can see here we have an M, which stands for the Metro. Now, Newcastle's Metro, the Tyne-and-Wear Metro, is a light rail system that has been around since the 1980s. So it's been around now for roughly 40 years, and it provided 40 million journeys between 2007 and 2008. So a lot of Newcastle's population rely very heavily on this type of metro service. It's the second largest metro link in the UK. So London is the biggest. So London is the biggest. So that falls in at first place. And then we have the metro is the second largest. So they've really integrated this system into the culture and the way of life that we have within Newcastle. Now, other things we have are things like, if we look closer in, we've got lots of, where's it gone? We also have things like the coach station. So the coach station is important because that encourages people to get on things like buses and coaches to get into the city instead of relying on cars. In addition, we also have Central Station. So Central Station not only connects us to the rest of the UK, but also connects us to places like Northumberland. It also connects us to places like the metro centre. So the actual metro link, so the M, does not connect us to the metro centre, but the train station does. So we have lots of ways that we're trying to integrate ways to reduce traffic within Newcastle. And then there's other things I haven't mentioned, such as the park and ride. So you can park up your car outside of the city, and then you can get the metro into the city. And there's also things like cycle lanes. So as I mentioned before, along the Tyne Bridge, so along this area here, let's change colour, we have seen an increase in cycle lanes. So this will encourage people to cycle instead of driving their car. Okay then, so what we're going to do now, so once you've annotated this map, we're going to look at different places around the world and how they've attempted to make their traffic more sustainable. So task 4, you have got a template that looks like this, and you need to type either into the template or create a template similar and write into it. And you're looking at what Freiburg, Beijing and Singapore have done and whether you think it's been successful or not. So in this section here, you'll need to include things like specific dates, places, data, and money, so how much it costs. And then in this one, I would give it a score between 1 and 10. Has it been successful or not? And then say why. And then there's a challenge question where you have to compare all 3 of them if you wish to. Okay, so where do you get the information from to complete task 4? Well, you will notice on the next slides, there is information for the following strategies. So I would go onto the slide, pause the video, and then complete the information for Freiburg. Then go on to the next slide, pause the video and complete the information for Beijing, and then pause the slide and then complete the information for Singapore. So you read through the information, you write down the facts, what they've done, whether it's been successful. So for this one, I would try to include things about the cycle paths, with 900 parking spaces, the fact that they've restricted car parking spaces, and the fact that they have increased, tram journeys have been increased by 25,000 in 1 year. So that would suggest it's very successful. Okay, and then you can also see here at the top, this figure here is showing you the changes. So in 1982, 39% of the population were driving into the city, whereas in 2020, that's dropped to 29%, so it's 10% less. Okay, then you do the same thing for Beijing. So you need to pull out the facts such as 5 million cars. They've increased a lot of strategies since the 2008 Olympic Games. There's been a 20% car drop, like use of cars. And then you do the same thing again for Singapore. Now, if you think the video is a little bit pixelated, you can get this information for Singapore, Beijing and Freiburg from the Caboodle textbook. So if you go onto Caboodle and you find pages 190 and 191, you will get the exact same information, but hopefully the video will allow you to just use the video instead of having to go elsewhere. So once you've completed the tasks for the following strategies, we're moving on to task 5. So once you have filled out your template, you need to have a go at deciding where you think these strategies are. So which has been the most sustainable and why? So if we gave Freiburg a score of 7 out of 10, then I would put Freiburg roughly here. If I gave Singapore a score of 9 out of 10, then Singapore would go roughly here. And if I gave Beijing a score of 4 out of 10, then Beijing would go roughly here. Okay, and make sure you say why. So why has it been good? Why has it been bad? How could they help it improve? Now, the information from this task is helpful for when you complete your test in your next lesson. Well, it's not really a test, it's more of a quiz. So the quiz looks at everything you've completed this week during your lessons on Monday and Tuesday, and there will be a 6-mark question looking at ways that we can make traffic more sustainable. So make sure you have your notes with you when you're completing the quiz. So once you've completed tasks 1 to 5, you need to make sure that you submit them into the assessment folder that I have created. And if you have any questions during the activities, please send me a message on It's Learning.